Hello everyone. Today we are taking a deep dive into this BBC news story. Trump and Xi conclude very successful talks, but few deals confirmed. We are going to break down exactly what happened here and what the real risks are that every investor should know about. But before that, you are watching Decode Daily News, where we take the biggest business and finance stories and decode them so anyone can understand. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. So let us get into it. Trump arrived for a high-stakes summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on Wednesday, accompanied by several CEOs, and here is what that really tells you. When you bring the heads of the world's biggest companies on a diplomatic trip, you are not just doing politics anymore. You are doing business in the most visible way possible. CEOs do not fly across the world for photo ops. They go where the money is, or where they think the money is about to be, and that is only half the story. A high-profile business delegation spanning agriculture, aviation, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence chips. Now sit with that for a second. That list is not random. Every single industry on it is a direct battleground between the US and China right now. Agriculture, aviation, electric vehicles, AI chips, these are the sectors where the two biggest economies are competing hardest. And if you hold positions in any of those areas, this summit was directly about your portfolio. And this is where the real story is. Tesla CEO Elon Musk stepped off the plane ahead of senior officials, including Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and Greer. And that one line changes everything. He walked off before the Secretary of State, before the Defense Secretary. That is not an accident. That is a signal about who is driving the agenda here. When a tech billionaire outranks senior cabinet officials on the walkway of Air Force One, it tells you something real about the priorities of this administration. And then came the detail that says even more. A sign of the crucial economic agenda that lay ahead. Pause right there. Economic leverage is the foreign policy. That is what that phrase is really telling you. The companies most exposed to China are sitting closest to the decision makers. And the decisions being made in those rooms have direct consequences for markets, supply chains, and your money. Now this is the part I could not move past. Trump told reporters on Air Force One that China had agreed to buy 200 Boeing jets. And here's the part that hits different. If this deal closes, it would be Boeing's first major Chinese contract in nearly a decade. The company has been locked out of the world's second largest aviation market because of trade tensions. So on paper, this sounds enormous, but notice the word agreed, not signed, not confirmed, agreed, and then came the number that changed everything, with a potential commitment to buy an additional 750 planes. And think about what that actually means, potential commitment. That is 2 layers of uncertainty stacked on top of each other. Markets move on headlines, reality moves on signed contracts. And right now, all we have is a headline from one side of the negotiation. Investors who chased Boeing stock on that announcement are betting on a deal that is still very much in progress. And this is where it gets interesting. There has been no confirmation of any deals or purchases from the Chinese. Now let that sink in. The American president announced it on Air Force One. China's foreign ministry did not confirm it. In diplomatic terms, when one side announces a deal and the other side stays silent, that is not a misunderstanding. That is a negotiation still in progress. The gap between those two positions is exactly where the risk lives. Here is the piece that reframes everything. Surprisingly, Trump told reporters on Air Force One that he and Xi did not discuss tariffs at all. And that is not a small thing. The tariff truce between the US and China expires in November. That truce is the only thing keeping trade between the two countries from completely breaking down. And the two leaders sat together for 2 days, and apparently did not talk about it once. If that is true, the clock is still ticking with no plan on the table. And he did not stop there. The White House, however, said both leaders agreed to establish a board of trade to manage the relationship. And here is what that really tells you. Read that carefully. The goal of this structure is to manage around the problem, not solve it. It is a workaround. And workarounds are useful until they are not. If November comes and the truce expires with no real agreement underneath, no board of trade is going to protect markets from what follows. Now this next part is what really caught my attention. The Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-US relations, Xi warned during the talks, according to Chinese state media. And that is not a small thing. Taiwan is not just a geopolitical talking point. It is the physical location of the factories that make the chips that run the global economy. TSMC, the world's most advanced semiconductor manufacturer, operates there. Xi raising Taiwan at a trade summit is a reminder that every deal on the table sits inside a much bigger and more fragile picture. And then came the response that says it all. If mishandled, the two nations could collide or even come into conflict, he said. Now sit with that for a second. That sentence was spoken at what both sides called a successful summit. When the headline is warm and the underlying language contains warnings about collision, you have to read both. The optimism is real. The tension is also real. The question for investors is which one is priced into the market right now, and which one is not. So that is exactly where my take comes in, but real quick before I give you my take, this video is for educational purposes only, not financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. So, what concerns me most coming out of this summit is the gap between the story being told and the deals that actually exist. 2 days of meetings, warm rhetoric, state banquets, honor guards, and when the dust settled, not a single deal was confirmed by both sides. Markets love certainty. What we got here was performance. The Boeing announcement is the clearest example. If those orders are real and get signed, that is genuinely significant for the company and for aviation investors. But the Chinese government has not said a word about it. And historically, when China wants to signal a deal is real, they say so publicly. The silence matters. The tariff truce expiring in November is the thing I would be watching most closely. That deadline is still live, the underlying disagreements are still live, and two leaders went through an entire summit without addressing it directly. That is not resolution. That is postponement. So the smart move here is not pessimism, it is patience. Watch for signed agreements. Watch for Chinese confirmation of the Boeing and agricultural deals. Watch for what happens with that tariff deadline in November. The headlines were positive. The fundamentals of the situation have not changed as much as those headlines suggest. If you found this breakdown useful, do me a favor, like this video, and subscribe so you never miss an episode of Decode Daily News. We break down the biggest stories in business and finance so you always know what is actually going on. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Do you think the Boeing deal actually closes before the end of the year? Or does it fall apart before ink ever hits paper?